it's not a good service unless it was just spontaneous everything. We can't get in either. We just have to be available, and hopefully we all can make corrections as we go and find that heavenly flow. Today's one of those days where I was actually at a birthday party for Tristan, and Cassie came to me and she said, I had a dream. I thought Martin Luther King was getting ready. But she had written it out, and here I am at my grandson. No, it was actually, it was Joe's. Yeah, it was Joe's skating party thing. And I was sitting there on the side on that very uncomfortable seat on the side of the skating rink, and I was reading this outline that she had written about her dream over and over. I just couldn't quit. And I realized this is what we're supposed to do this week. Now again, not to skip subjects, but before I turn it over to Cassie, you know, maybe somebody's going to be watching this broadcast years from now. This is, in America, this is when the coronavirus is really, in our area, starting to hit home. Of course, we haven't had any incidents in West Virginia reported yet, but, you know, we got to be national world champs for something. So, but what was that?
I said apparently it's the best hygiene.
Well, yeah, we have the best hygiene. Or we've had the worst and our antibodies have built up. But anyway, going forward, I've read different things. I've not put my head completely in the sand about this thing. You try to be responsible when you have a group of people gathering, and you're responsible for that gathering. And I don't get too much into the media, but I get in just enough to be abreast of what's going on, and especially in our immediate area. And I saw different churches in our area have closed, and different ones are just streaming online, and we may do that going forward. But see, I'm encouraged because I feel like our church is built for this. You know, our church is built for this. You know, we're a small gathering, and we don't do guilt. If you're not able to come, I always encourage you, don't trust and depend on me to hear God for you. You hear God for you.
Amen.
And usually it's weather related, you know, in our area. It's, you look out and see if your tires are good enough to get there. But in this instance, it's more health related. We've got to use some sense too. When you have a family or an elderly person or anybody that has some immune deficiencies, you've got to exercise some wisdom. But if someone's not here, we're always encouraged, don't rush to judgment. Just like any other Sunday, if so-and-so isn't here, we don't say, oh, boy, they weren't here, they must have backslid. That's not what we're built for. We're might have been an opportunity for them to minister to their neighbor. So let's don't rush to judgment. And let's don't rush to judgment and offer our opinions. I think this is an area we can learn in, myself included. Don't always superimpose your opinion about anybody's situation. You know about unsolicited advice. So, who knows what's going to happen this next week? But we've been led, even though we're a small church with a small budget and we're saving money trying to get a building that serves the needs of the community, we'll serve the... We've had a little bit of ability to hear the voice of God in the last 6 months, and even though we're saving for a building, Cassie said, hey, why don't we live stream our services? We're already equipped to do this. So depending on what happens, I can either pre-record, or we can live stream and I can go to Cassie's house, or we can all meet at wherever. Or, you know, honestly, we're meeting in Dee and Norris's house. They have a part to play here. They may not want our germs here. So,
Germs are welcome. Germs are welcome.
but you know, that's a consideration. Just like when we came out of a regular church building into this home in years past, when we've had weather-related issues, I'm more apt to cancel because I'm looking out for them. I don't want someone to slip and fall, and you know, you never know who's going to show up, and I don't want to put them in a bad position. But we all know, they're well aware, someone could fall at any time, whether it's ice and snow or whatever. So they're already out there. They're already saying, hey, we know this is the Lord and He wants us to open our home, and we're thankful, right?
Amen.
We're still thankful.
Amen.
But let me remind you, even though every source of media you have, whether it's your Facebook account or Twitter or whatever social media you use, whatever your news source is on television or internet, everything's coronavirus. Hey, let's leave that. We can if you'll just hear her out, and let's dissect. Cassie had a fabulous dream, and I believe it's prophetic for not only for us, but for the house church movement. We're just going to see where this goes. I have some different things to say, but I hope I don't say anything today. Okay? Cass, you ready? You said you did too, huh?
Hold the mic closer. Well, sorry. I'll try to talk loud. So this was a few nights ago. It was the night before Joe's party. So
Wednesday night.
Yeah, it was Wednesday night. So we had just had home group Wednesday, and then that night, I woke up around 12:30 or something. Baby is hungry. I'm feeding him, and I'm like, I gotta finish feeding him because I have to write this dream down that I just, you don't want to wait till morning because then you'll probably just forget it all. So he's done eating. I'm like, Tony, take the baby because I need to write this down before I forget it. So, but in my dream, we were in like it reminded me of like a band rehearsal room or choir room, but it was home like, and there was a circle of chairs, and there were just kids. They were like maybe 8 or 9-ish to like teen ages, like all ages of teens. And they were just total mix of like races and ages and all this stuff. And there was a circle of chairs, and there were some rows. And in the circle, these kids all had instruments. And I remember one girl, braces, teenager, and she's playing the violin, and she's just like getting a word from the Lord, but it's just in music. And she's all excited, and then in the rows, kind of standing around, it was like I don't know how else to say it, but it was like black church choir. It was like these kids, and there was this one kid, he was like this tall, and he was just singing beautifully, and then everyone would answer back in these beautiful harmonies, and they were just worshiping God. So the whole room was just alive with worship. And then behind me at the door, somebody knocked at the door, and they were coming to arrest one of the kids. And there was like a news crew, and it was really dramatic, and like they were angry, and they were coming to get one of these kids, and nobody responded, like in fear or anger. They just kept praising God, and they brought the whole praise. And all the kids, everyone just brought their singing and everything outside where the situation was going on, and they just kept singing and praising God, and they didn't ever respond. I don't think they even arrested the kid that they came to take. But like why would they arrest a kid? I don't know. That was a dream. But they just kept worshiping God in such a way that you just didn't want to leave because it was beautiful. The harmonies were amazing, but it was like almost unpracticed but still perfect. Dreams are weird. Like they just were totally casual praising God, and the feeling in it was just like a blanket of peace just settling over the situation. So not even just the kids stayed calm. The people that were angry and fearful that were coming, they just joined right in, because it's like you couldn't help but stop and acknowledge how amazing God was, because that was the presence that you felt there. So they just kind of kept it going. So when I woke up and that was all running through my head, I can almost still hear the music. And in my mind, I felt like I was remembering Pastor Darren telling us all, open to, like, when does he say open to? Like, I don't bring a paper Bible, so I don't open to anything. But he was telling us to open to something, and I remember opening it, and read verse 1, and I don't know of what, verse 1 of what, it was nothing, but it said, when there's fear, my children worship. So, like, it was like shining in my brain. And I'm like Googling it when I wake up. There's no verse that says that, so I don't know. It's just God's word to me right there. When there's things like that going on, we worship. And I just thought back about how those children, and they were literal children, but I think we can all be part of that. Like, have that childlike, not getting worked up, totally just trusting in God, worship, and it changed the whole atmosphere around them. And so they couldn't stay fearful, and they couldn't stay angry, because all you could think about was how amazing God was. And not just because of like the lyrics of the song were about God, I don't remember what they were, but it was just that atmosphere and that presence. So and I think as I've been kind of mulling it over afterwards, I like music, and that's definitely one way we can worship, but how many ways do we have that we can worship God to refocus the atmosphere around us, whether that's serving people in whatever way God has you serving, or painting, or whatever you're doing to worship Him, and not putting the focus on the fear, and not putting your focus on the people or the anger or the attitudes that are around you, but instead, and thinking also like Paul and Silas in jail, when they prayed and they praised and they sang, it didn't just set them free, it set everyone around them free.
That's good.
So I just keep hearing that in my head. When there's fear, my children worship. And it was like a command. There's fear, so worship. So that's all.
Wow.
Verse 1.
Verse 1 of
I
something.
think that speaks of priority, though.
Yeah.
I think it's an instruction, not just to us, but I think this is a kingdom word, because, like she said, she felt like she was one of the children. And remember what Jesus said: unless you come as a child, you'll by in no ways enter the kingdom. Yeah, I think it's a kingdom admonition that when there's fear, and fear is behind most everything, anger and all these different chaoses. There's a lot of reactions, but the root's fear. I think the worship admonition is one that refocus, magnify God. We all have work situations. We all have things going on around us. Who else?
I believe that faith is always stronger than fear. Faith is our worship. It's what we do, it's who we are. When you said commandment, it's not just the commandment, it's the answer. It's literally the answer. It's what changes atmosphere. So when you're worshiping, you're actually engaged with a personal relationship with what the Lord is doing. Like you said, it doesn't have to be music, although in your dream, because you're musically inclined, you were seeing all the beautiful melodies and the music part, but it was just the worship of the people that changed the atmosphere of who they were speaking with, who they were talking to, who they were acknowledging, who they were changing their perspectives with. It was the answer as well, so faith is always stronger than fear. And yes, it will always be the answer, whether you're serving or loving or all the above. When you think of Romans 8 and everything that talks about the worshiping the Lord, and prophecy and all the listing of the 7 listings there, it's just amazing to see how God works through all His diversities and through each and every person that's needed. And that's the beauty of it. It wasn't just one person. It was all kingdom and all nationalities, and it was almost like He was letting you see through His eyes how He sees His children. It wasn't necessarily kids, probably just us in general.
Yeah, and that was the feeling, like looking at them, they were children, but I knew that I was not a child, and I was like singing along, and I was feeling very much a part of it. And it was like, if you were around it, you couldn't help but feeling a part of it. Even in, like, when the people come to the door, I felt like, they were maybe not believers, but they couldn't help but acknowledge God even whenever they were in the presence of that.
I know you and I spoke of this before about just and I don't want to
put so much focus on the positioning or pattern or anything, but just like when we gather at Marionettes, the circle of the group, it's more of a family of commuting back and forth and building one another up. I know the pattern that I gave you, that the Lord showed me, was musicians and everybody gathered in praise and worship, not separating in separate groups, but all focusing as a circle, not stage-wise, but it was everybody focusing to the Lord rather than us and us to them. So.
And that kind of lended itself to just, okay, let's pick this up and move it to the situation that needs it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just,
When the government was coming in to arrest,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the worship of the Lord diffused the power of the government.
Yeah, like I said, nobody actually got taken away. We knew that was like their purpose when they came, but it just, I don't know, there was a lot of, and I remember a news crew being there, like it was talking, I don't know, we've had a lot of media stuff going on where they're focused on the fear and they want to illuminate that, and there was nothing left to illuminate other than just God.
Well, that's too bad.
Yeah.
I was listening to somebody the other day, it might have been Bill Johnson. He was talking about somebody, can't tell you who they were. They were trying to do some kind of ministry, like a street ministry, and it just wasn't taking place there. I mean, it just wasn't, seemed like it wasn't getting off the ground. They weren't getting the results they wanted, and they decided they were just gonna have some worship in the streets. And it wasn't like for a performance, it wasn't like, for a show, it was just they were gonna do some worship just in the streets. And they did, and then things started to happen, and then he said the police came to him and said that, when they did that they noticed that the crime decreased, and it had like an effect on the neighborhood. Even though, their focus wasn't that, they were just said they were going to worship God and put their focus on Him and took it off of the area and maybe what was going right or what wasn't going right, and God has a funny way of working things out when you do that.
I think we're at such an advantage with everything that's going on with the family and the family atmosphere here and the freedom that we've been given here that a lot of places don't give. And I know there's people looking for that freedom in their circumstances that they're in right now, not knowing whether they can go places and different things. We've already been hit up and asked, online, different questions like, what does communion look like in a home? What is that? How do you do communion at home? There's people that have gone to church their entire life, gone to these buildings, and they don't know. They don't know how to.
They don't know how to follow Him in their home.
They don't. And so I think we have great opportunities here and if everybody that is in all these buildings and that love the Lord can tap into that as well, there's gonna be nothing but praise on the streets. Look at every street corner where we have church buildings and people that have gone for 40, 30, 50 years. But if they can tap that in, and then the generational tap into their families, into their neighbors and their communities right there, that's a huge opportunity.
I can't help but wonder, as I read that, how many of you remember last week I was encouraging Tammy to play her violin, whether it was just for me or just, I don't know, there's something about, of course we've always loved Tammy, and she is our little girl, even though she's probably somewhere north of 40 now. But when you heard Cassie read or talking about her dream, I immediately thought of that, and I don't know if I don't know how dreams work. This could be just God. Maybe I was in the flow and speaking about, and then He gives her this dream, or maybe just because she heard me say it, she dreamed it. I don't know, but I don't know. I thought of Tammy when I thought of a little girl. Shouldn't have braces for them. But the little girl was playing her violin. I think they're great. Kind of like what I was talking about at the beginning of the service, how I wish I had Cassie in my back pocket. I think you have the same thing. I think you can change atmospheres with your just doing what you do. And it's kind of like what Barry's talking about. Just go worship. You don't know for what reason, but let God just take it and go and run.
And I'm telling you, the worship, I can't tell you how many times, even in the most lost seasons, how that worship has been so strong in me, so strong. And I do believe that it is a gift, and I do believe that there is something there that I do need to tap into. But my heart for worship and what I've just learned about worship so much so far is when you were talking about the fear, and you know the fear out there in the world right now, there's a lot of different kind of fear going on. But when you are worshiping, even in the worst circumstances, when you start to worship, it's like a valve that gets switched, and it puts a huge stop sign on that. And for whether it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds or whatever long the song is, it shuts that for a minute, because I can't worship the same God out of my mouth and curse the same person over here. I can't do this and be trembling in fear. Now, I've done it before and stopped worship and started to go do other things, and I could feel it come back again. But the worship, I really just believe that the Lord is just encouraging us to worship, and whatever it is for us, for the community, for the world, but for us, shut the enemy's mouth and begin to realign in a different direction. And it's going to change. It's going to change so much. So just remember that you can't do two things at the same time. And when you do that, it's going to shut things around you. And then when people out there are seeing you doing that, it's going to make an impact.
And that fear is like a wildfire. It's like contagious. But like you said, our faith is so much stronger. How much more how much more effective if we can be worshiping and praising and refocusing the atmosphere around us, that it could just totally overpower that wildfire. It'll be like nothing, because it's so much more powerful.
People will be drawn to the peace in our lives. When they see everybody else fearful, they will see, why aren't you afraid? You know, what's going on? Why isn't this not bothering you? You know.
Well, I've got to tell you, it's not quite as spiritual, but it's still funny. I went to pay my house taxes, and I tried to pay them, and that lady, I have never in my life, probably the top 5 meanest person I have ever met in my life.
Top 5.
Top 5. She made the list. She's probably more about 3, but we won't judge. And she was so nasty and so rude to me. And even in the basic things, I came up, the officer was like, go ahead. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, she's not wanting me over there. And he's like, no, you go ahead. So I go over, and I'm just kindness. How are you today? Try to do all this stuff, and she started in about the virus, mumbling, and just hateful stuff. And she won't even look me in the eye. So I'm like, all right, Lord, so I need to either shut up, because I'm now mad, because I'm ready to give her a tongue lash. So I was like, shh, Tim, shh. So I said, well, honey, you just get on that vitamin D. You just start taking care of yourself. I'm really asking the Lord what I was supposed to say. And she looked down at me, and it was, kind of reminds you of Venom.
Yeah.
She said, that has nothing to do with it.
Oh, sure.
Enough so that I pulled my head back, and I thought, ooh, you're nasty.
You are me.
You are me. Yeah. So she went, and she's just, nip. I'm at the prime candidate age. I'm this, I'm that. And she went on and on. But she was nasty about my phone number. So finally she's all done and I've had it and I could feel my temper. And it was kind of like righteous anger. I looked down at her, I put my little finger out, and I said, I choose not to live in fear. I thanked her and walked away.
Oh boy. That reminds me so much of what I was thinking about this morning. I wrote it down. It says we have a choice.
Yeah.
We have a choice. And we can choose to believe what the world says about whatever, or we can believe what the Word says. And then I was reading Psalm 91 in the Passion Translation, and just some key things that just jumped out at me. Don't fear a thing! Exclamation point. Don't fear a thing. This virus is just a thing. Don't fear a thing. Even in a time of disaster with thousands and thousands being killed, you will remain unscathed and unharmed. And that was verse 6. And then later on at verse 9 it says, when we live our lives within the shadow of God Most High, our secret hiding place. That's worship. When we're worshiping God, and we're in that secret hiding place, we will always be shielded from harm. How could evil prevail against us? How can evil even come in when we're worshiping? Or disease affect us? And then I said, it's our choice. We can either choose to believe the lie or what the world says, or we can choose to believe what the Word says, the truth. We can decide what's the truth. Is the truth what the Word says, or is the truth what the world says? And that is, when I was thinking about all that, it brought back this first song that I wrote, Laboring to Rest, because that's what that is. It's just choosing to believe what the Word says. And putting your trust in Him, that's all laboring. But it is a labor to do that.
An effort.
You have to purpose. You have to purpose to do it, because the world just bombards us with what they have to say, and you have to purpose to choose to believe what the Word says instead. And I was thinking, what does the Word say? The Word says, no plague will come nigh my dwelling. And so that's Psalm 91. So if you just, anytime fear tries to come on you, worship and the Word. What does the Word say?
It's funny how little thing, even the littlest thing, God jumps in on me. This morning I was, going through my clothes, getting ready to just brush and get out the door, and I was like, hey, I'll just grab a t-shirt. And I was like, no, I want my gray t-shirt. I was like, no. And then I'm like literally going through my closet, looking at this gray. No, that's not my gray one. No, that's not. And I had other ones that I could have worn, but the one was my faith over fear. They just kept staying on. Wear your shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the most interesting battles that was ever fought, King Jehoshaphat sent the worshipers out in front of his army, not his best soldiers. He sent the worshipers out. And that caused panic and fear in the armies that were coming against him, so that those armies fought each other and destroyed each other. And so any general would think that was a foolish thing to do, but it was what brought victory, was worship.
Can you imagine being the worst person in that scenario? I mean, seriously, being like, oh, I'm praising and loving Jesus, and then being like, can you step in front of this war zone, please? Sorry.
A lot of times, we're our worst enemy, because we wake up in the morning and, we can't blame anyone but ourselves about how we're going to act or react, because we're the only ones in the house. We're the only ones that's listening to our own self. And how many times I've said, whether I don't like what I'm going through, or don't like what I'm feeling, or don't like the situation at all, I've learned to nevertheless. I love that story about the 3 Hebrew children in the fire. That just absolutely just amazes me always. And that's my go-to all the time. There's one more in the fire. There's one more in there with me. I'm never alone. Nevertheless, I will bless you, Lord. Nevertheless. That's again, making a decision, choosing to do it God's way, choosing to bless God. And you may have to do it over and over, like 30 or 40 times that morning.
You know, that is the truth. I've said sometimes, if you heard inside my little head,
Oh yeah.
you know, 30, 40, 50 times a day, I've walked by the mirror, especially when Shane's, I don't do it when Shane's home, or I'm in my car. I have went into that bathroom and looked at that mirror and said, so?
Yeah.
Why are you so downcast? Or, so, what are you doing? And just give myself a lash.
How many times I've had to say, you need to stop.
You need to stop.
You need to stop.
I choose.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, God. Sometimes that's 30 or 40 times a day. I'm sorry. That was me again.
Right.
You know, when those guys said nevertheless, they weren't just having a bad day.
Right. They were amazing children.
The furnace was turned up how many times?
10
Yeah.
times.
You know, and they were, I haven't read the story for a while, but I think they were basically told either you worship
Right.
the statue or whatever it was, or
Bow down to,
you're
yeah.
going to burn.
Right.
And they're like, you know, our God will deliver us. Nevertheless, if He doesn't, so be it.
We'll
Yeah.
still worship.
That's why I said, no matter how much pain, I said, hey, I didn't think I was going to live forever anyway. And reality, heaven sounds like it's a really nice place to go. Hello.
Yeah.
You know? Don't threaten me with heaven.
There's a song out right now, and it's, I can't remember the exact name, but it's basically, there's another in the fire standing next to
Oh,
me.
how awesome.
I will get that out.
Yeah. You know, when you are going through something, or whether it's yourself or your family or the whole group is, we forget sometimes that He's very, very with us every moment. And you hate to think that, because sometimes our moments aren't real nice. But He's still with us in those awful moments. Even those moments that we're not real proud of ourselves. He's still with us. And so we're never doing anything alone anyway. So it's just amazing.
The song that I keep running into, I played it for someone before service, but it's I think it's on the same album as that Remember with Brian and Katie Torwalt, but it talks about praise before my breakthrough. I will praise before my breakthrough till my cry becomes my triumph. So not praising because we've broken through already before that, and that praise is what becomes our triumph and our victory song. You know, I worship because I trust you. It's a good one.
And when you remember His faithfulness, how He's come through over and over and never failing, when you remember that, you're almost embarrassed.
Right?
That's when every time that verse says, "Oh my soul, remember who you're talking to, really, Joy." Come on, you know the Creator.
Yes.
Yes. That's what made me think of me in the mirror. What are you so doing?
Talking to yourself. Yeah.
Oh, poor Derek.
Or how quickly I can read the Old Testament and judge the nation of Israel for being like, oh, God's not here. Like, He just opened the ocean, you walked across it. Say, oh, we don't.
Which
God's
goes
not here.
back to how quickly we forget.
Oh,
He split the ocean for you.
Yeah.
He split that water.
But how many things has He done for me? And I still
Right.
go, oh, I don't know if we can get through this one. You know.
But the thing I love is that first thing comes out, that trash might come out, but always that most powerful, the Spirit of God lives in us, and it always seems to creep out and says, nevertheless, or great is thy faithfulness, and you've never failed me, Father. You've never once failed me. And then all of a sudden our bodies line up with join in and say, okay, 30 times a day.
30 times a day.
30 times.
That just makes me feel better about myself.
I'm so good about it.
I told I'd be like, you just heard inside my little head. Stop it. I bless them. Oh, I bless them. Oh, I'm sorry.
Or say, you know she's mean.
That other song is that Worship While another one that you could pull up, but
I need to correct something. I said Romans 8. I really meant Romans 12. And if it's okay, I'd like to read it, a little portion of it. Beloved friends, what should be our proper response to God's marvelous mercies? I encourage you to surrender yourselves to God, to be His sacred living sacrifices and live in holiness, experiencing all that delights His heart, for this becomes your genuine expression of worship. And now I'm going to jump down to verse 4, explaining what the services of worship actually are. It's not exactly what we think. In the human body there are many parts and organs, each with unique function, and so it is in the body of Christ, for though we are many, we have all been mingled into one body, and this means that we are all vitally joined to one another, with each contributing to the others. So our gifts are for the others. God's marvelous grace imparts to each of us varying gifts and ministries that are uniquely ours. Now remember, we're talking about service of worship. This is the whole point. So if God has given you the grace gift of prophecy, you must activate your gift by using the proportion of faith you have to prophesy. And if your grace gift is serving, then thrive in serving others well. And if you have the grace gift of teaching, then be actively teaching and training others. And if you have the grace gift of encouragement, then use it often to encourage others. And if you have the grace gift of giving to meet the needs of others, then may you prosper in your generosity without any fanfare. And if you have the gift of leadership, be passionate about your leadership. And if you have the gift of showing compassion, then flourish in your cheerful display of compassion. And those are the services of worship I believe that you were seeing. You were seeing it in music form. And it is our way to God to really get there in music form. Even the world believes that music calms the savage beast. You know, so it is the answer. It is truly, truly the answer of who you really are created to be. You know, in those services of worship, just start moving in that, and it will change the atmosphere around you. And joining together with the body in a unity of a circle. A circle is definitely a symbol of unity. It is also key, you know, to all of us each playing our part. It wasn't just one person. It was, you know, in your dream, it was everybody.
Everybody, but it was one sound. Altogether, but it was one, you know, but it was very dynamic, and definitely every part made it what it was, you know.
Didn't Jesus tell the disciples and those that he was teaching that we adults need to become like little children?
Yeah.
When he warns them, he says, unless you come in and enter as a child, you'll in no wise enter the kingdom. Of course, coming up, I always thought, oh, I can't get to heaven. But we understand now that teaching on kingdom is, from Paul's perspective, the kingdom came at the cross. And it lives within us and through us. I think we need to not worry about how much time we've been here, or how short it is, or how long it is. But like Dee, I think it's more than a command. I think it's the answer. And even though we have different ways of worship in a corporate setting, there's one thing to sing, and then there's another thing to worship. And I do think Annette's song is a worship. And just like God expressed himself through a dream today, I'd say let's also acknowledge the other gift of what was prophesied years ago, that he would start to give different ones. In this instance, Annette, he gave her a song. So let's embrace the move of the Spirit, and let's sing Annette's song.
We were having technical difficulties.
We should be able to hear you.
Is the mic?
Is it good?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hey, we go.
We broke through.
Good job.
Can you put the words up?
How do you sit down when he says I will stand?
On your cross.